take a closer look at the National Assembly as pressure mounts on President Uhuru Kenyatta to take the House that is becoming more of a rogue institution than a lawmaking organ. We will also bring you the story of a woman. A doctor left a bandage in her womb, and after a short while, the bandage started to rot. Find out what she had to endure to stay alive. Also tonight, veteran rally driver Ian Duncan wins KCB Mobi Bank Nakuru Rally. I'm Linda Ogutu, and these are your top stories tonight.
Mimi natoa hapa wito kwa Bwana Uhuru Kenyatta asiweke sahihi hiyo mambo, arudishe tena ibaki vile Senate ilikuwa imepitisha.
Seeking presidential intervention, pressure mounts on Uhuru to reject division of revenue bill.
Wakati alirutisha pesa sasa kupasiwa mara ya pili, ndio sasa wakapata pamba iko ndani.
Lucky to be alive, a first-time mother's anguish at the hands of a doctor.
11 December ilikuwa tarehe moja Thursday. 10 December tarehe moja ilikuwa Wednesday. 9 December ilikuwa Tuesday.
Genius or talent, the entire calendar at his fingertips. And a 6-year-old boy written off by doctors at 5 months lives on. Many thanks for joining us. Court leader Raila Odinga has urged the National Assembly to be objective and work together with the Senate in anchoring devolution. Speaking in Western Kenya today, Raila also called on President Uhuru Kenyatta to reject the Division of Revenue Bill 2013, saying that assenting to this bill would amount to abetting efforts to frustrate devolution. Samogina reports on the rogue National Assembly that is on the war path for revenge.
The moral legitimacy of the 11th Parliament is highly at stake. 3 months since swearing in of members of Parliament, the National Assembly has drifted from its core business into sideshows engaging in tough wars with nearly all constitutional institutions.
If there are thieves, it is the Kenyan people who are thieves. If they are greedy, it is the Kenyan voters who are greedy.
Substantially, the 11th Parliament has only approved the Cabinet Secretary's list, marking the lowest performing legislative institution. The lawmaking organ reduced into picking fights instead of making laws. The Assembly's attack on independent institutions, led by House Majority Leader Adan Duale, Suba Member of Parliament John Mbadi, Kitutu Chache North Parliamentarian Jimmy Angwenyi, Igembe South Legislature Mithika Linturi, and Homa Bay Women Representative Gladys Wanga.
The commissions, which think they are too independent, will know that the way they have reduced salaries of MPs, we will also reduce their budget by 57%.
In the 3 months, the National Assembly has gone rogue. A power struggle and clamor for pay hikes has been central in its undertakings, with the House Speaker Justin Muturi as its umpire. The venomous parliamentarians spitting fire at anyone opposed to their salary hike offensive. Taking refuge as lawmakers, MPs have resolved to threats to twist independent commissions and the president, claiming they would frustrate the budgetary making process. It is a house that has shelved the national good for its self-preservation.
A few officers have gotten drunk by power, probably, and are now intoxicated because of their misinterpretation, probably, of the law and the constitution.
Equally, parliamentarians have antagonized the Senate in unending tough wars over superiority. The recent flashpoint being the Division of Revenue Bill, which the National Assembly torpedoed all amendments by the Senate on grounds the National Assembly is superior to the Senate. This despite a procedure in place that in case of a standoff on legislation, the speakers of both houses should invoke a mediation committee to harmonize a bill agreeable to both houses.
Na mimi natoa hapa wito kwa Bwana Uhuru Kenyatta asiweke sahihi hiyo mambo, arudishe tena ibaki vile Senate ilikuwa imepitisha.
And if the National Assembly thinks that the defenders of the interests of the national government, then they are grossly mistaken. Then they are representing the wrong interests in this country.
Mimi ni kama wewe tu.
And the National Assembly's intolerance of coverage on their greed and primitivity has resulted to kicking out of parliamentary journalists from their designated media center. All said and done, it is a house that has earned itself public ridicule rather than trust, betraying the citizenry it's supposed to represent. Samogina, KTN, Nairobi.
Let's see how that goes in the coming days. Of course, that is a story that we are keeping an eye on for you. Elsewhere, President Uhuru Kenyatta has today sought the forgiveness of those he may have wronged, while assuring the country that he holds no grudges against any individual. The president made the statement when he attended an evangelical crusade at Uhuru Park. Thousands thronged the venue to attend the event dubbed the Great Jubilee Gospel Crusade, graced by renowned German evangelist Reinhard Bonnke. Deputy President William Ruto attributed his win to divine intervention and urged Kenyans to come together. President Uhuru Kenyatta, on the other hand, urged the country to move forward and tackle issues that would uplift the standard of living among Kenyans. He reiterated the message of reconciliation and asked Kenyans to cooperate with other African countries while using the natural resources in various areas to alleviate poverty while enabling the continent to realize its potential.
Nobody, not even our very close friends, ever believed that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, with the kind of baggage that we have, that we would be anywhere near the leadership of our country. It takes God.
Kwa roho yangu mimi sina chuki na mtu yeyote. Kama kuna mtu mimi nimekosea, nasema naomba anisamehe. Na kama kuna mtu ambaye mimi amenifanyia maovu, mimi pia nimemsamehe.
All right, now to a sad case of medical negligence, and the 22-year-old woman who underwent a cesarean section at Bungoma Hospital had bandages left in her womb after the birth of her first child. The doctor who carried out the botched operation is now still at large, and even though the bandages were removed from her abdomen in a second operation, this traumatizing experience will remain etched in Maureen Hayemba's mind forever. Catherine Omwanto reports.
22-year-old Maureen Hayemba can barely walk. She has undergone 2 operations in under a month. In the month of May, Maureen was rushed to hospital in preparation for the birth of her son. At first, she did not suspect anything, but over the next couple of weeks, the abdominal pain became unbearable.
Nilifika huko wakasema ati niende teta. Nilifika teta nikapasuliwa, nikakuja nikamaliza siku 3, wakanidischarge nikarudi nyumbani. Nilirudi nyumbani nikamaliza siku 2 na tumbo inafura, naanza kuuma huku side. Sasa vile iliuma na usiku wa 8 ni usaha naanza kutoka. Vile ilitoka tena nikarudi hospitali asubuhi.
The bandages left in her womb by a rogue doctor in Bungoma District Hospital caused an infection. Maureen's parents took her back to the district hospital, where the doctor in charge admitted that the operation was botched.
Sasa wakati raundi ya pili sasa kupeleka tena fieta, wakati alirutisha fieta sasa kupasuliwa mara ya pili, ndio sasa wakapata pamba iko ndani na usaha ilikuwa imekaa kwa tumbo. Sasa hiyo raundi ya pili ya kupasuliwa hiyo ndio imesaidia huyu mtoto, na maumivu bado yako na maumivu zaidi.
Tembea sina nguvu. Tonda inakuna tu. Tena nikilalia side moja nikiamka siwezi.
The doctor who operated on Maureen the first time has since disappeared. Catherine Omwanto, KTN.
From medical negligence to environmental conservation, and efforts to ensure development projects do not encroach into the Nairobi National Park continue today as the Nairobi Green Line was officially commissioned at the National Park. The 30-kilometer long and 50 meters wide belt, made up of a forest of 300,000 indigenous trees, stretches from the Cheetah Gate in Athi River to the Carnivore Restaurant. The initiative, backed by the M-Pesa Foundation, which was launched 3 years ago, and when completed will act as a green buffer between the Nairobi National Park and any negative effects of human encroachment. The Nairobi National Park is the only park in the world that is located within a city.
This project aims to protect the national park from pollution, from encroachment, and from human-wildlife conflict. But if we're not careful, the next generation will not know what a cheetah is. Let us all remember the words of the late Wangari Maathai, that we owe it to ourselves and to the next generation to conserve the environment so that we can bequeath our children a sustainable world that benefits all.
Let's stay with the Nairobi National Park, and construction work on a section of the southern bypass has been halted after a 3-member environmental tribunal ruled that there was imminent threat of encroachment on the Nairobi National Park if construction was allowed to continue. The case of encroachment on the Nairobi National Park has been dragging for more than a year, and the National Environmental Tribunal has ordered the Roads Ministry to legally degazette part of the park if it wants to complete the road. Wilkis Tanyabwa reports.
The National Environment Tribunal essentially halted work on a section of the southern bypass. 3 parties, the African Network for Animal Welfare, the East Africa Wildlife Society, and a conservationist, Dr. Paula Kahumbu, had brought the matter before the tribunal, arguing that the section of the bypass intended to join Mombasa Road with Langata Road would encroach on the Nairobi National Park.
Kenya was issued by NEMA a license which said they are not supposed to get into the park. And that means if they were to get into the park, then they would be in violation of that license.
The southern bypass was conceptualized as a road which, once completed, would connect Mombasa Road and the Nakuru Highway, starting at the Mombasa Road junction, running down the park border, past Kibera slums and Ngong Forest, and ending up in Kikuyu. It, however, emerged that if the road followed the route that had been mapped, it would encroach on the Nairobi National Park, going 300 meters inside it and cutting off an area of at least 60 acres.
And as we began to inquire, we were told every few months it was going a little bit more into the park and a little bit more into the park. So we began to look into the legal nature, and we discovered that actually this plan was to go right into the park.
This wall marks the boundary of the national park. Beyond it, there should be a corridor, an allowance for persons who would build a road or a railway system. However, we are informed that this corridor no longer exists. It has been encroached upon. In 1956, a strip 60 meters wide was degazetted from the Nairobi National Park to create a transport corridor. This corridor has since been encroached upon, so that in order to construct the bypass along the proposed route, the ministries involved would have to degazette yet another strip. This would call for a process where Cabinet would discuss the matter, the public would be required to participate, and a motion would be brought to Parliament for approval. Only then could construction go on as planned. But Parliament is yet to establish the structure for approval.
We cannot treat our national parks, which were set aside for future generations, as part of our heritage. We cannot treat it as a place for development. These areas were set aside to protect our national heritage. We really have to do that. We have to defend that.
Following the ruling, work continues on other sections of the bypass, but the long process required to degazette this section means if an alternative cannot be agreed upon, this could be the end of the road. Wilkis Tanyabwa, KTN.
So Kenyans turned up in large numbers this morning for the 2nd annual Ahadi Kenya staircase race at the Kenyatta International Conference Center here in Nairobi. The unique staircase relay, which is one of its kind, raises money to fight the Giga menace. Teams of 5 set off on the relay race that saw each team member tackle a portion of the section from the parking lot up to the stairs to the 27th floor and back down again. Afterwards, participants also took part in potato and sack races. The staircase relay race is aimed at raising funds that will help to alleviate the suffering of families in areas where the Giga infestation problem poses a great challenge. Over 40 corporate groups took part in the race. This year's organizers hope to raise over 5 million shillings from the event.
Team resolution 122. And I see. Number. Where? Change.
Okay.
The purpose of this race is to be able to rehabilitate people we have realized that Chigas is a result of poverty. So the money raised today will go towards empowering the Kenyans who have recovered, starting for them some businesses and being able to put them back on their feet.
It looks like it was a lot of fun. Now, the government has set aside 15 billion shillings for irrigation in the next financial year. Deputy President William Ruto says the bulk of the money is targeted at boosting food production in arid Kenya, which constitutes 75% of the country. While addressing a meeting of the Pastoralist Parliamentary Group in Mombasa, Ruto said the government is committed to devising lasting solutions to cushion pastoralists and crop farmers from natural disasters and especially the effects of climate change. The Deputy President, however, noted that development is impossible without adequate security.
Mechanization in Western Kenya for the pastoral community. So if it's about the irrigation potential in arid and semi-arid areas is enormous. In fact, 60% of the 2.5 million acres of uncultivated lands in Kenya is in arid and semi-arid areas. Next week, there will be an advert on the first 1 million acres to get a consultant for the first 1 million acres on how we are going to turn it around, half of it for food production, a quarter of it for livestock production, for horticulture, for sugarcane, and all of that is going to be in arid and semi-arid areas. I want to promise you that the Jubilee government has every plan and intention to deliver on a livestock insurance scheme that will ensure that pastoralists have access and recourse when they lose their livestock. I'm sure the Director General of the National Police Service, himself being a pastoralist, we now have no choice than to sort out the insecurity in all our pastoralist areas.
Let's now move to the fight for survival. And most Kenyans take for granted the resources and infrastructure available to them. But for residents of Merile in Marsabit, they are yet to be convinced that they are actually in Kenya owing to the poor state of infrastructure and the lack of most basic of resources. KTN's Carol Nderi visited the town where mobile phone networks are a foreign concept, water is scarce, and joblessness is driving the youth to crime.
What strikes you initially as you set foot in Merile Marsabit is the vastness of the arid land, but this group of young men of the Merile Youth Association are trying to eke a decent living in spite of the myriad of problems at hand. While cars get stuck in mud all the time, the least we expected was ours to get stuck in sand. This temporarily stalls our journey. But that is not all. While most Kenyans take the access to a mobile phone network for granted, our attempts to make calls back home were futile until we were advised by the locals to climb this hill. It took us close to 20 minutes to climb this hill while avoiding crow and reptiles just to make a call. Just but some of the challenges that make development sound like a fairy tale here.
Internet ndio shida. Na sijui mbona serikali haitaki kutuwekea maboosters ya kutusaidia hapa hivi.
The young men of the Merile Youth Association repair cars that have broken down, but despite acquiring a car cleaning machine as a donation,
tunategemea tu magari moja zile zinapita hapa. Tukipata pengine nyingine hapa tu imeharibika hapa pale ndio tutapata kusaidia, lakini zingine zinatoka kwa lami, unajua sasa rough road.
Kwa tunafanya kazi za mapancha nini kuokolea magari, si hata zenu zimekuja na mashida na zikaokolewa.
And even then, when they need water, they have to fetch it from this borehole with great difficulty. There was a river here once, but it has since dried up. Insecurity is also a major headache for those using the Marsabit-Samburu highway as armed robbers attack those plying this route even in broad daylight. This plaque was erected here in memory of a Chinese national who was killed right here.
Nafikiri ni idling ndio inafanya watu hata waende wakaibie magari, wakapige watu kwa barabara waibie. Kwa sababu kama una job na una mali na serikali haishughuliki kutafutia kitu kama hiyo, kama yani kazi.
For now, they have to soldier on and hope that help will come their way soon so that eventually they too can see themselves as a part of Kenya.
Tungependa serikali hata kama ni mambo ya youth fund, at least itusaidie ndio tupate kujiendeleza zaidi.
Pesa za youth zikuje upande wetu sana, zisiachie upande hizo za Kenya. Ni hiyo tu yani.
Carol Nderi for KTN in Merile, Marsabit.
You're watching Saturday Night Live. Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's cross borders now and focus on a story that has been making headlines all over the world. Former South African President Nelson Mandela's condition has improved after he was admitted to a Pretoria hospital in the early hours of this morning with a recurring lung infection. A statement from the office of South African President Jacob Zuma says Mandela is now able to breathe on his own and doctors are doing everything they can to make him comfortable. Today's admission marks the second hospitalization in as many months for the frail anti-apartheid hero, who will turn 95 in July. On April 6th, he was released after being treated for pneumonia during a 10-day stay at the hospital. The Nobel Peace Prize winner has stayed in hospital 4 times in just over half a year, mostly over problems with his chest. Now, Mandela has not been seen in public since the World Cup final in 2010, where he appeared on the pitch before kickoff. He was diagnosed with early-stage tuberculosis in 1988 during his 27-year jail term and has long had problems with his lungs. He has also had treatment for prostate cancer and has suffered stomach ailments. And of course, the entire continent and the world is praying for his well-being. You're watching Saturday Night Live, and just ahead, Genius or talent, the boy who has memorized the entire calendar. Stay with us.